I like the Gnome ancestry for my Giant Instinct Mauler Barbarian build. Sure, it's funny and it's ironic. You got this little willowy gnome that you would never expect to be a frontline barbarian, and certainly never expect to be a legendary warrior, and yet there it is. The thing of it is, this build actually works. It works thematically, it works mechanically, and it's just really fun. The thing that makes the Gnome ancestry make sense for this barbarian build is their unusual magical abilities. As descendants of first world pilgrims, magic still spills out of them at unexpected times. Some gnomes get startled and their hair turns blue, stuff like that. It's funny, you gotta love it, but it's not gonna help a frontline fighter. But this gnome, when startled or enraged or threatened, that fey magic kicks in, and they grow to size large or size huge. Or when they get attacked, they phase out of existence for a moment to avoid some of the damage, and then phase back in and land a devastating hit, or they just burst into mirror images of themselves. So it turns out that the Gnome ancestry and all that fey magic, it's going to be really useful for a frontline barbarian. But does playing a small gnome with an ancestry flaw in strength make my barbarian weaker than other barbarians? Not really. If you want to start with the full 18 strength, and I certainly recommend that, you do have to take a voluntary flaw on 2 additional ability stats at character creation. I'd say take the penalty in intelligence and charisma, because neither one of them is tied to a saving throw. You would end up with an average 10 in charisma, and a 10 in wisdom, and a slightly below average 8 in intelligence. So you're a little rustic, but not too bad overall on the mental stuff. And then you're right there on the physical stuff with that boost in strength and constitution. So these stats coming out of your ancestry, that looks perfect for a barbarian right there. I like that. And being a gnome isn't going to have any effect on your barbarian abilities either. Your gnome giant instinct barbarian is going to have that fantastic melee damage just like any other ancestry. This comes from that Titan Mauler instinct ability, which allows you to start out with a weapon built for a creature one size larger than you. Of course, this comes at the penalty of being forever clumsy 1 while wielding this weapon, but we don't care about that because we love this extra damage. And it's not just a little extra damage either. You deal more rage damage than any other barbarian in existence. This extra damage makes a Giant Instinct Barbarian's single action strike deal damage comparable to other classes' 2-action attack activities. You heard me right. At level 1, you're adding 6 extra damage per hit when you are raging. That is like adding an extra die of damage on each hit. At level 7, the rage damage increases to 10 damage on each hit, and then at level 15, it increases to 18 extra damage per hit. Hold on to your butts. Now look at this. The average damage from a power attack from a fighter is pretty similar all the way through. Right, level 1 to 20 goes back and forth. But what this means is that the Giant Instinct Barbarian is hitting with the power of a 2-action power attack, but they're doing that with just their single action, basic run-of-the-mill strike. In other words, the Giant Instinct Barbarian's basic strike deals damage like a fighter's power attack. Yeah. The Giant Instinct Barbarian also has incredible reach, even for this little gnome. At level 6, with the giant stature feat, you can spend a single action and grow to size large. So the gnome goes from size small to size large just with the single rage action. Now, this doesn't add any damage. All your extra damage is already added into the rage damage, but it does increase your reach by 5 feet. At level 12, they get the Titan stature feat, and they can instead increase the size huge, which gives them 10 feet of added reach. And finally, at level 14, add in Giant's Lunge, and now for an additional single action, they can increase the reach of their weapon by 5 feet for the rest of the combat. So now, on the first round of combat, for 2 little actions, assuming you have the space to expand, this barbarian can grow to size huge. That's having a 3 square by 3 square base, and they would have a 20-foot reach in any direction from that base, and they would have this reach with their great axe too, not a reach weapon, and that's pretty awesome. Now here is why this reach, when combined with that high damage strike, gets so crazy. With the Mauler archetype, At level 16, you take the Avalanche Strike feat, and now you are basically just a wrecking machine in the body of an adventurer. Usually an Avalanche Strike or the Fighter's Whirlwind Strike, sure, it's awesome to make a strike against all the targets within reach. Of course you want to do that, but for most classes, the damage from a strike is not that good. It's kind of a little bit watered down compared to your 2-action attacks. So you're making the decision, do I want to attack everyone, or do I want to use a stronger specialized attack against one target? That's not the case with the Giant Instinct Barbarian. Their basic strike hits as hard as specialized strikes. So now you're making those hard-hitting, power attack type of damage slams into every target within your reach, which is now all targets in a 55-foot diameter, and every one of those attacks is at your highest base attack bonus. So let that soak in. That's nothing like that. It's awesome. Now here is why the Gnome makes this build better mechanically. The biggest weakness for this build is your defense. When you go into a rage, you're already taking that -1 penalty to AC. Plus, this character is always clumsy 1 on top of that from wielding their giant weapon, so now you have a -2 AC right off the bat. You don't have that extra armor class like the Animal Instinct Barbarian gets. You're wielding this giant weapon in 2 hands, so you don't have any extra armor class from a shield. So what you end up with is an incredibly hard-hitting character that is spending half of its adventuring career unconscious at dying 2. So we want to help ourselves out defensively, and the magic from the Gnome Ancestry does just that. The Gnome Ancestry feats are perfect to keep a frontliner upright. Unexpected Shift is a reaction that you can use whenever you would take damage from an attack, from a spell, from any other effect, a trap, anything. Basically, if you're taking damage, you can use this reaction. Now it starts with a DC 16 flat check, which gives you only a 25% chance to gain the resistance all on damage equal to your level, as you magically shift partially out of existence to avoid damage and then back in. It's a really cool effect. Now the thing of it is, this is all damage, which means it blocks physical, it blocks magic, it blocks elemental, it blocks negative, it even blocks mental damage or poison damage. Whatever damage you take, this thing can resist it. Also, if the damage coming in is from multiple types, it's going to block each one of them separately. So if you're level 5 and you take damage like 7 slashing and 4 fire from some kind of flaming sword or something, it's going to block the slashing and the fire separately, blocking 5 off the slashing and completely blocking that fire damage. So you're only taking 2 damage. The drawback with this is that you are dazzled after using this ability for a round, which that is an interesting trade-off. You get to block some damage, but you are dazzled, which makes everything concealed to you for a round, which gives you a 20% chance to completely miss them on your own attacks. This is still in your favor, though. You're taking a sure thing at that point because you've already passed your flat check, so you have a 100% chance to block the damage. And you're taking that and you're giving them a 20% chance to block your damage, albeit it's going to be all of your damage because you will miss completely. Still, I like the odds on that. I get a 100% chance to block, and I'm only giving them a 20% chance to block. I'll take that disparity all day. And once you hit level 9, you don't even need to worry about this anymore, because with the Fortuitous Shift Ancestry feat, the flat check decreases to 11, which improves it to a 50% chance to activate when you use the reaction, and there's no more dazzled side effects. So after level 9, this thing is really great. I really want to point out how good this is. The amount of damage blocked is comparable to a shield block with the Sturdy Shield, which is by far the best shield for shield blocking. But in some ways, it's even better than a shield block. 1, you don't have to spend an action raising your shield each round. 2, you don't have any shield that you need to repair. 3, your hands are free to wield a giant weapon in 2 hands. And 4, it blocks all damage, not just physical damage like a shield would. The only drawback is that there's a chance it won't work if you miss your flat check, and then you waste your reaction. Still, it's only a reaction. I think there's a lot of upside for a high damage, low defense type of build, and I definitely think it's worth your reaction each round when you're taking damage. At level 13, we add in Instinctive Obfuscation, which is, once again, this odd first world magic bubbling out at unexpected times. Instinctive Obfuscation is not just a great opportunity to use this awesome word, it's a great ability. This is a slightly watered down mirror image. It's kind of like a pina colada on a cruise ship. It tastes like there's something in there, but you know it's not as good as the ones you pay for. In this case, it's a once-a-day reaction, when attacked, to split into 3 versions of yourself, instead of the 4 like the spell does. It's a good defense option though, so drop this one at the beginning of a tough fight, and let the defense from this stack with your fortuitous shift reaction, because they're both going to work together to mitigate damage. For more defense and survivability on this build, I would add the level 8 Barbarian feat Renewed Vigor. For a single action on your turn, you can keep adding temporary hit points back to yourself equal to half your level plus your con modifier, which works out to roughly your level worth of temp hit points each round for an action. Maybe it's a little less than that, but in that ballpark. But between this and your unexpected shift reaction, you have quite a bit of defense and buffer, all for a single action and a reaction each round. To me, that seems like a decent sacrifice to get some decent defense. The end result of all this is a really fun character. The damage is really high. The Avalanche Strikes are, I mean, come on, that's absurd. We've added quite a bit of survivability with the Gnome ancestry, and I think you can find a really fun personality for this character. Out of combat, I picture this being a typical whimsical gnome, but once combat breaks out, obviously they go into a frenzy and turn into a crazy barbarian, and their magic spilling out everywhere. It's pretty cool. And that is it. I've been your host, Crunch McDabbles. This has been the Crunch McDabbles Show. Survive Galarian with an overgrown gnome. That rhymes. I like it. Whoever came up with that, give him a raise. I like the Gnome ancestry for my Giant Instinct Mauler Barbarian build. Sure, it's funny, it's ironic, that little willowy gnome that you would never... Oh, thank you, Windows. The thing of it is, this build actually works. The thing of it is, this build actually works. More rage damage than any other barbarian in existence. That's dramatic. I like that. You deal more rage damage than any other barbarian in the history of the world. You deal more rage damage than any other barbarian that has ever been. You deal more rage damage than any other barbarian could ever have even dreamed of. Even when they were a little kid dreaming of how much damage they could do, they couldn't even dream that much damage.